You're welcome, everyone. And so, what I'll do is, for the next 40 minutes or so, I'm going to bring you through the wonderful world of mushrooms and tell you many different aspects of how important fungi, mushrooms, toadstools, everything are in all our ecosystems. And then I'll also cover a little bit on foraging and nutrition and a few things like that as well. I've got a fair few things to get through. Normally it takes me about an hour and 20 minutes. I've got to do this in 40 minutes. So if you notice I'm talking very fast, it's because I got to do it really fast. But you can see how beautiful mushrooms look at that. That's typically our main mushroom season is autumn. So these would be a range of autumn mushrooms, probably picked around October. There's a Has anyone ever seen the documentary film called Koyaanisqatsi? Have you ever seen it? It's amazing. You can get it on YouTube, but it's more or less a documentary that shows a kind of loop of our cities and how we live. You know, the traffic coming in, the lights coming on, and people getting on trains, and people getting into supermarkets, and crowds everywhere, and and it's a Hopi Indian world that means life in turmoil or crazy life or out of balance. And what we do I'm a founding member of the Association of Foragers, which is a kind of an international foraging teachers group. And what we try to uh, inform people on is that to connect through foraging and mushrooms being an ideal thing, and you realize you can connect to the earth through that. And you'll notice that if you pick berries in a particular place, or if you pick mushrooms in a particular place, or you pick leaves, wild garlic, or something, you'll notice that you have a connection to that. And that's particularly around the towns and cities. You come along sometime and the thing is gone. Like, where we are around Dublin, you come along, there's an entire forest gone. They just clear felled it. And you feel personally hurt, it's because you've developed that link. But it's important for us to have that link. And particularly I see with kids now today, an awful lot of them don't get exposure to that. When I was a kid, we were encouraged to be out in the field, and we'd know the birds, and we'd know the nests, and we'd know we'd fish, and we do all of that. But kids don't seem to get that exposure anymore. And I think it's very important to us, particularly when times are difficult in life, to be able to realize that you're just a part of it all. And studying fungi and how they work is a great way to understand that. You'll see the complexity of nature and how it all works. So typically, when in autumn, when we're doing mushroom hunts, this is we'll have many different types of mushrooms, and we go through them and identify them, and we take out the good eaters and eat them, and people get a chance to taste them. This was all actually on Loch Corrib in Galway. We got many different mushrooms there. You can see how colourful and beautiful they are. Some of these are edible, some of these are deadly poisonous. And I'll go into the specifics on that, by the way. So, does anyone know what those mushrooms are? No one? Seps. Good. Because they'd be the I mean, it's worth saying that as a culture, as a society in Ireland, we're really fungophobic. And we have been brought up to be afraid of mushrooms. And, I remember as a kid bringing home a mushroom that wasn't a field mushroom and saying, this looks like a good mushroom, can we eat it? And God, the reaction, well, get rid of it and bring it down to the bottom of the garden and bury it. And the general view was that they're all poisonous except for the field mushroom. But we used to pick field mushrooms as kids. Our parents would bring us out. I was brought up in Galway, and bring us out to East Galway for some reason, where there were sheep in the fields, and we picked them. And in those days, you'd see kids standing at the side of the road. I don't know if any of you remember this, with little strings of mushrooms, and people would pull over in cars and buy them off them. And so we did have that culture, but it was only with one mushroom. Whereas if you go to Europe, anywhere in Europe, and particularly then into Eastern Europe and into Russia and on further, you will find a huge culture of positive towards mushrooms. And they have festivals and they celebrate them in season. And there are some wonderful. This, for example, is in Spain. And you can see that guy there is the Does have a light on it? Does, yeah. That's the local mycological society. So we brought a group of people over there, and they do mushroom hunts, and they celebrate mushrooms, and we have lunch and local food and wild food and all that kind of stuff. And we've done that in other places like. I go as far as Turkey. I speak at a festival in Turkey where they pick morels in spring, and that's a very important part of their seasonal food. Like, and they can actually make quite a bit of money. So if you live up in the mountains in Turkey, and you can get 40 or 50 euros a kilo for morels, that's a lot of money. And aside from the fact that they're very tasty and good. But so throughout Europe in autumn you will see these scenes in the markets where you see actually wild mushrooms. So these are the ones in Ireland you'll see referred to. These are cultivated. Nothing wrong with them, but these are the kind of, the oyster mushrooms and that you'll see in Ireland. Wild mushrooms don't lend themselves to a kind of supermarket model because they may have little worms in them or things like that, and they don't have a long shelf life, many of them. And there's dried mushrooms. That's in Barcelona, I think, in the market in Barcelona. And then that's just some of the things that, like we go as far as Lithuania, France, Spain. We've brought groups on mushroom hunts to visit mushroom festivals and have a great time and get to taste some really good food. And that's a mushroom festival in Lithuania, in a place called Varina. And if you're ever near Vilnius in the autumn and you can get to that, you should. It's a train journey out of Vilnius, and it's wonderful. You see all the trees. It's in a kind of a forested park, and the best of food and stalls. And you've got beers, homemade beers, and things like wild honey and all kinds of things from the forest. Culture in Lithuania and many then of the Eastern European countries is very much, the forest is a very important part, and of course in Poland as well, And we've learned from a lot of people who are now our new Irish have brought that to us, and I know from talking to you that any of you who are Polish and that would be or Eastern European, you come here and you wonder, why is it that people don't know anything about mushrooms? Because the cultures are very different. So, in terms of mushrooms, fungi, the mushroom is the fruiting body of a fungi. I'll go into that, but it's considered to be the third kingdom. So you can see that there's we have the bacteria, plants, animals, and fungi as is its own kingdom. And fungi actually, it is on that same branch, that evolutionary branch, as animals, not plants. So they're closer to us than they are to plants. People are inclined to see mushrooms as a kind of, just another kind of variation of a plant. But in fact, they're closer to animals, and their cell walls and things have chitin in them and things similar to animals. There's estimated 12 million fungal species, but fewer than 150,000 have been named. We are ongoing exploration of fungi it's only starting, and we have all kinds of medicines and things that we have taken from fungi. And if you look at things like bread, anything that's fermented, alcohol, cheese, chocolate, they have to get a fungus to work on the chocolate beans to actually convert them into that flavor. That's where it comes from. And so there are all kinds of, and particularly medicine, or antibiotics and things like that. The fungi have been on the planet for 1.5 billion years, predating plants and animals, world's largest living organism. On healthy soil, under a footprint on healthy soil, you have thousands of kilometers of these little mycelial threads. So, when you look out in your garden and you say, geez, look, there's mushrooms growing in the garden, where did they come from? Where they came from is you've got these mycelial threads working under the ground, working with the grass, working with your plants, working with your trees, positively mainly, and under certain circumstances they produce mushrooms. And the purpose of the mushroom is to produce spores, and that propagates it. So it's like the apple on a tree. Um, so healthy soil, if you spray soil, um, there's fungicides and things like that, and they're killed. And a lot of farming soil now, and has little or no fungi in it, as they don't have worms. A lot of the farmland really has, when they plough fields these days, often there are no birds following them because there's no worms in the soil. And some of the modern farming techniques, that's the result of it, which is, the fungi fixes carbon in the soil. So it's when you kill all the fungi in the soil, it releases that carbon, and it's no longer sequestering it. So it's a very important part of sequestering and keeping carbon in the soil. It's one that's not generally considered. Everyone talks about trees and that. It takes 30 years before a tree is actually carbon neutral, I think, where it gets to the point that it's absorbing carbon. So okay, I'm going to just touch on a few of these things. So, communication. They talk about this wood wide web is one of the expressions that they've been using. So, I've been telling you about the mycelium under the ground and how it goes into the roots, and you can see it here, the way it's integrated in with the roots of all the plants and trees. So they all have different relationships with different fungi, and the roots of plants and trees, and particularly trees, are not particularly good at getting nutrients. If you think about it, if you have a forest, or if you have a huge tree, look at a huge tree, and it has to stay in the same place, and it needs all the nutrients that tree requires, and that's being brought to it by fungi. So it stays in the same place, but all the fungal networks that are working around the roots are bringing the nutrients back to it. If you think about it, if you put a plant in a pot and just water it, it will eventually start to wilt because it runs out of nutrients in the pot. But if the fungal relationship in the natural soil is bringing those nutrients in and feeding. So can you imagine in a forest how important that is? So the cycle is, that all the leaves that fall and the litter that falls are broken down above the ground by saprotrophic fungi, and then those nutrients are taken below the ground by the mycelial networks back to the roots of the trees. So they're essential part of that cycle. But this is showing also, not only are they bringing in nutrients, this is an experiment where they showed that there was actually communication between plants at the root level through the mycelial networks, through the fungal threads. And how they did that was they put these plants in soil, and they put these bell jars over them. And if you introduce green flies to these plants, they have a protective reaction. What they actually do is they release a pheromone that attracts wasps that come along and eat the green fly, interestingly. But that's another story. But so what they did was they introduced green fly into one of the bell jars on the plants, and the others started to react as well. And so obviously something was going on under the ground at the root level where the other plants were reacting. When they did it in sterile soil where there was no fungi, there was no reaction from the other plants, thus establishing that the fungal threads were being used to communicate between the plants. So with the mycorrhizal relationship with the fungus, the growth is far greater. And this is, you can see here, the threads around the roots. These are all this little cottony stuff is all the mycelial threads. And up here we can see these plants are the same age. This one is without the fungal relationship, and this one is with it. You can see how much they grow. Here it is at an individual level. This is obviously far bigger. That's with the mycorrhizae, and this is without it. And there are now farming methods where they're using this in organic farming. They're using this, and you can get far greater productivity. Um, so with the mycorrhizal relationship with the fungus, the growth is far greater. And this is, you can see here, the, the threads around the roots. So with the mycorrhizal relationship with the fungus, the growth is far greater. And this is, you can see here, the threads around the roots. These are all this little cottony stuff is all the mycelial threads. And up here we can see these plants are the same age. This one is without the fungal relationship and this one is with it. You can see how much they grow. Here it is at an individual level. You know, this is obviously far bigger, that's with the mycorrhizae, and this is without it. And there are now farming methods where they're using this in organic farming, they're using this, and you can get far greater productivity without the cost of all the chemicals and the spraying and the damage that brings. Bioremediation, so fungi breaks down toxins, and that's an important part of what it does. So you've got where you have hydrocarbons and pollution, you've got oil and that in the ground. If you think about it, oil is a natural pollutant. Like oil does break the surface without humans being involved, and it does pollute. But the fungi thrives on it. This was an experiment they did in the States where they invited in tenders to remediate highly poisonous soil, contaminated soil, and a guy called Paul Stamets, who's a mushroom guru leader, his approach was they introduced oyster mushrooms into the soil, and they eventually the fungus started to grow, and eventually it was thriving on the oil. It actually breaks down the oil and the hydrocarbons, and it started to grow mushrooms. And then those mushrooms, after a few weeks, they attract flies, and birds come in and eat them, and insects, and then they drop seeds, and within a short space of time, that was the best result of all the approaches. You have those initial anchor plants starting to grow, and the soil being remediated back to being normal. So food for humans is probably a big interest then amongst many of you. They're high in protein, lots of vitamins. There's a comparison, I don't know if you can all read that, where you're looking at, there's mushrooms down here. The red numbers are where they beat all the others. So we got tomatoes, carrots, broccoli, onions, cabbage, celery, and they're all, on protein. The mushrooms are highest. Vitamin B3, vitamin B2, vital things like selenium, which is vital to us. That's the only one there with a significant amount of selenium is coming from mushrooms. And vitamin D, has anyone seen the vitamin D enhanced mushrooms in the supermarkets? They charge a bit extra for them. The way to vitamin D enhance a mushroom is you expose it to light for a couple of hours. So if you bring your ordinary mushrooms home and put them in the window in the sunshine for an hour or two, it boosts the vitamin D significantly in them. Don't tell Monaghan Mushrooms I told you that. And then there's the medical aspect. More and more now people are using mushroom supplements to treat different medical issues. They reduce cholesterol, antioxidant, antibacterial. We had a lot of people taking them during COVID, taking turkey tails and things like that, which is antiviral. And they're being used to treat cancers and things like that. So you see there's been a fair amount of coverage in the last few years on medicinal mushrooms being used for different things. Turkey tails, these are ones that we have been using for quite a while. We initially people come to us and say, can we get them turkey tails? And we discovered why, but we couldn't keep it up because they're seasonal, and so then we eventually developed a supplement, and now we have a couple of different supplements. We've turkey tails and lion's mane. Turkey tail mushrooms are being used. So in Japan, with every cancer treatment, they use extract from turkey tail mushroom. In the West, where we don't do that because our system is different, and you're not even allowed to say that it can help cancer because unless it's approved by the FDA or whatever. And it's because it's not patentable. It doesn't really fit in with our kind of system of pharmacies. Where you could take 10 years to do clinical trials on it, and then at the end of it, when you've proven that it works or not, you then, if it's not patentable, then your competitor can immediately do it as well on the back of your expensive work. So it doesn't really work. But there are ongoing trials, and one of them is in Bastyr University in the States, and that on using this for treating breast cancer. But we find, just anecdotally, from a lot of people that buy them from us find them very beneficial. We have some, you can see them there in bottles. We have lion's mane and turkey tails with us. If you're interested, just talk to Frida afterwards. Lion's mane, similarly, we have people with stroke recovery, and it's neurogenerative, so it helps to grow the neurons in your brain in a simple way. And it's also used for things like even anxiety and depression and a range of different things. And then does anyone know what they are? Anyone recognize those? There's one, what? Two, arise, smile, four, okay, 5, 6, oh okay. So they'd be your classic magic mushroom, Liberty cap. You see with the pronounced nipple on the top. They're becoming more and more, like we had a group from one of the big pharmaceutical companies on a mushroom hunt a couple of years ago, and they said that this is the future. They are developing extracts. They always have to get extracts because they can protect them as opposed to using the whole thing, and for treating particularly depression and addiction. And they had been used, and I mean, you don't necessarily have to bring it to the point where there's a major psychoactive event occurring. It can be microdosing and that, so they've been proven quite effective at that. These are leaf cutter ants. So just to show you some of the other relationships that fungi have, aside from with the humans, these leaf cutter ants cut leaves and bring them back to their nests. They don't eat leaves. They farm fungi. So they bring the leaves back and feed them to the fungal farm. And different ants farm different types of fungi. And they will not let any other fungi grow in the nest. They will kill it. They have a specific fungi that they farm. And these little nodules that grow on the fungal roots, they then feed to their young. And it's an important part of their immune system. When a queen ant is leaving the nest to go and start another colony, she has a little pocket in her abdomen that she can take some of the fungi with her to re-establish the fungal farm in the next nest. But of course, there's always a downside. As there is with humans, obviously fungus can cause us trouble as well, quite a few. I mean, they can kill us. This ant has come across cordyceps, and cordyceps is it's a fungus that infects ants, and it kind of takes over it actually changes the way they behave, and it forces them to eventually climb up a twig or a branch to go as high as they can, and then when they get to the top, they lock their mandibles in, and these little shoots come out of the ant and rain spores back down onto the colony. If soldier ants detect the behavior difference in an ant, they will take that ant, bring it away from the nest, a long way away from the nest, kill it, and then kill themselves. That's how seriously they take it. Moths and other insects also have cordyceps. You'll see some of these. They're Irish ones. One's a beetle and one's a moth. Interestingly, now, you're going to think I'm crazy, but if you have to have, when you accept the fact that how the cordyceps works with ants and what it does to them, the next thing you find out is that when kills them. So when they climb to the top of the twig and lock the mandibles in, that it actually kills it, and the shoot comes out, the kind of mushroom comes out of the ant at exactly solar noon, no matter where they are in the world. Now, I know this sounds completely and utterly bizarre, but it's a fact. And they reckon it is probably to do with the ants are most active at that time of the day, and obviously it's probably hot, and so it's raining the spores down on, an active nest of ants. I mean, if it did it in the middle of the night, there's probably no ants around. But there you go. What was that movie that was the which? The Last of Us. Yeah, and I went into that a bit, didn't it? Cordyceps is another type of cordyceps, and this is considered to be a super nutrient. It kind of boosts performance. This is a little maggot in the ground, and it gets infected with cordyceps and grows this kind of globe-shaped thing, and that's the fruiting body. And they are considered. They actually are used. They were used in China to enhance athletes, and in the 1990s, in the national games in China, they broke world records all over the place, and they couldn't work out why, but it was ultimately considered to have been cordyceps that did it. If you take cordyceps, and we actually have cordyceps supplements as well, your blood is enhanced to be able to hold more oxygen. You can hold 14% more oxygen in your blood, which increases your performance ability. They can actually measure that through measuring your exhale, how much you exhale with cordyceps or without, and there's a 14% difference that you retain the oxygen. They're very expensive. 20. They're not as expensive these days. They used to be $20,000 a kilogram, and throughout Nepal, where they harvest them naturally, in season, the place is crawling with people down on their hands and knees with combs going through the grass to try and find these things, because they can make a good money with them. So what is a mushroom? So the mushroom is the fruiting body of the mycelium colony. So it's like the apple on a tree. And like the apple on the tree, so the apple has to be eaten, or a berry has to be eaten for it to do its job. A mushroom has to be taken away from where it is, or to spread the spores. And particularly things like, if you think about things like a truffle, for example, which is an underground mushroom, if a truffle stays in the ground and isn't eaten by something and then spread on, then it doesn't do its job. The primary job of the mushroom is to spread its spores. And they're temporary. People talk about, you shouldn't be picking these mushrooms because they're rare or whatever. But really, a mushroom is a temporary thing, and it's usually there. Some of them are there for less than a day. Some of them can be there for a couple of weeks, and in that time they will sporulate and spread the spores, and that's ultimately spreads the organism. So when you're looking at a mushroom, you're looking at, the obvious. You've got your cap, your stem. You've got your gills or your hymenium under the cap. When you're looking for identification, you'll be using these types of terms. You've got rings, stem. If you have a vulva at the base, that's a kind of an egg that it grows out of. That would indicate that it could be a very poisonous amanita. So you're looking at all of these identification criteria. There's the cycle. You can see the spores, the spore germination generates mycelium, then the primordia, which grows further mushrooms. There are three different types. There's parasitic, which are obviously speaks for itself. They're damaging. They can damage trees and plants and things like that. Saprotrophic, which breaks down all the debris and that in the woods. So it's important in the woods that all that debris and the leaves and the branches and all that, broken branches and trees, like a tree that falls in the woods, it becomes an ecosystem. And it's a hugely, it's a significant resource for the woodlands. We're inclined to say, well, it needs to be tidied up and removed and cleaned up and all that. But it absorbs water. It's full of fungi, and and obviously insects and things like that. And then it's breaking down all the nutrients, and they all are absorbed back into the soil and back into the trees again. That's saprotrophic. And then the mycorrhizal are the ones that I was talking about. Many of the good eaters, where they've got that what they call a symbiotic relationship with the plants and the trees, where they're exchanging nutrients. They're giving nutrients to the trees and the plants, and in return, the plants are photosynthesizing and giving, I think it's carbohydrates back to the fungi. It's funny, they're very effective at it. They can actually extract nutrients out of rock. There's a thing we do with truffles, and they're saying that the stones around truffles, where you have truffles growing with a tree for a while, they round, they kind of get polished, like almost like a sea stone, a stone on a beach, because the enzymes that the truffle uses to break down the stone actually take the edges off it. I won't go into too much detail. So you're looking, when you're looking for mushrooms, you're really looking at different types of trees. If you go into a particular type of forest, what kind of mushrooms are you going to find, and what kind of trees, based on the trees that are in it. Birch trees are good, oak, beech. Yew trees, any of you who have animals probably know that horses or cattle or anything like that, yew is poisonous. If a mushroom grows out of a yew tree, it may be an edible mushroom, but if it grows out of a yew tree, it can't be eaten because there's poison in the yew tree. Taxol. So just to make the point that there's probably 4,000 different types of mushroom producing fungi in this country. Of that, there's maybe 50 of them that are poisonous and 25 that are really good eaters. What we do is the only shortcut in terms of being able to identify the good eaters is focus on the two extremes. Learn a few of the poisonous ones and learn a few of the eaters. And then the ones in the middle, like when we do our mushroom ones, we'll end up with a lot of the ones that are in the middle that aren't particularly good for eating, or might cause a stomach upset, or they're not worth eating. They don't taste, But if you focus on the two extremes and learn a few of the good eaters, and more importantly, some of the very toxic mushrooms. Now, I don't know if I'm going to get time to get through the different ones, but I'll give you. So this would be our kind of the cep, the porcini. I already mentioned this. You can see you'll see these growing always around trees, and it could be oak trees. They even grow around the Sitka spruce trees, often early in the season. You can find them in Sitka spruce forests. And what you're looking at is this porous substance under the cap. And when you see that, that means it's likely to be a bolete mushroom, and possibly a cep, which is a good eater. You can see them, they're brown, and they're very tasty. Some people go out, it's like when you go fishing with someone, some people will be walking around saying, there's no mushrooms here. You kind of got to get into the zone. You got to get into the zone. We've got one guy he's brilliant. He's a PhD in mycology and all that kind of stuff. But he says, it's not about you finding the mushrooms. It's about the mushrooms revealing themselves to you. So you can see there's a typical autumn floor in the woods. There's a little mushroom, and you move in on that, and you can see there's birch boletes, similar to ceps, good eaters, grow around birch trees. Again, they've got that porous, spongy substance under the cap. These are other boletes. This is an edible scarlatina. You can see it's quite colourful and red. And when you cut it open, it goes blue inside. And they're a good eater also. These are an example of one of the bracket fungi that grow on trees. So this is this is chicken of the woods, and it is that yellow and that colour, and it's a good eater. Unless it grows on a yew tree, in which case don't eat it. There's one growing on a yew tree. And yew trees have those little red berries. People who don't know how to identify, well, you see yew trees in cemeteries and that, in churchyards. Um, Supposedly they were put there to stop. I heard one theory was that it stops people from grazing their animals in the churchyards, but I think more likely in Ireland the yew is a very spiritual tree and goes way back pre-Christian times. Um, so they're associated with spirituality and religion, I suppose, and God. And you can see they grow those red berries. Everything on the yew tree is poisonous except for the red berries. And the red berries are sweet, but the seed in the red berry is deadly poisonous. So you have to make sure you spit. In fact, don't eat yew berries. But he said it was okay to eat them, but no, you're supposed to spit the seed out. This is another one that's easy to identify, a parasol. Has anyone ever seen these? Like, they're big and obvious. Like, that's the size of a dinner plate now, the cap on that. And it's got that lizard skin on the stem, and they're very good eaters. Usually you'll find a few together. You know, it could be that height off the ground, like it could be, quite, not always that big, but when they get to grow, they grow that high. These are chanterelles. The chanterelle is a lovely mushroom, or the chefs call these girolles. In Ireland, the chefs call them girolles. They're a nice eater. You can see that lovely yellow colour. They also have a smell, they have a distinctive smell, and smell is often an identification factor with mushrooms. With chanterelles, you're looking for a kind of an apricot-y smell, sweet apricot-y smell. And in fact, they're lovely if you put them in vodka. People put them in vodka and it flavours the vodka like that. How am I doing time-wise? Okay. These are other chanterelles. I'm going to go really fast now because these are bluets, and you can identify bluets because of this beautiful colour, and their gills have that kind of purpley colour, and they're a good eater as well. Amethyst deceivers. Has anyone ever seen these? These are amethyst deceivers. They're a beautiful mushroom, and they're quite a good eater. Honey fungus. Anyone know what honey fungus? Honey fungus is kind of bad news for the tree, but good news for you because they're good eaters. We typically only eat the caps, and they grow in clumps around the trees. And they're called honey fungus because of the colour. They have that honey colour. Honey fungus covers about 4 different types of mushroom, and they're all edible. There's some growing on the tree. Saffron milkcap, these produce milk. The hedgehog. Has anyone eaten the hedgehog? They're called hedgehogs because if you look under the cap, they have these little spikes. That's why they call them hedgehogs. And there's 2 different types, and they're both edible, and they're hard to confuse with anything else, so they're relatively easy to identify. Puffballs, you see the big puffballs in the fields, those ones? They're edible. Once they're white all the way through, once they're in good enough condition, they're edible. They produce billions of spores. And these are smaller puffballs in the woods. These guys, the shaggy inkcap, those? You see them at the side of roads often. And again, they're edible. Or stinkhorns, they stink, and they're you smell them. Has anyone smelled a stinkhorn? Yeah, you smell them before you see them, and they smell putrid. And the way the stinkhorn works, mushrooms have many different creative ways of spreading the spores. The way they spread their spores is they attract flies. The flies land on the top, and they get this gooey substance on them, and the fly flies off, and the gooey substance dries out, and its spores are dropped all around the place by the fly. Anyone who smelt one wouldn't ask if they're edible, but they are actually edible. And truffles. Do truffles grow wild in Ireland? No. They do. We find them all over the place. We just don't have a tradition of picking them, but they grow all over the place. We actually have truffle saplings with us. We've a few, they're home oaks. So if anyone wants to buy a truffle sapling, you can have a look at them there and talk to Frida. So before I play this, people, so in Ireland typically when we find truffles, people contact us and say, oh, yeah, there were truffles. We think we found truffles. Can you help us identify them? And it's the best way to find them is with a dog. We have a trained truffle dog. We don't have him with us this weekend, but and if you train your dog, you can do it quite easily. And the dogs will find ripe truffles because they're going after smell. If the truffles aren't ripe, they don't have the smell and the flavour, so you don't really want them. But you can come across them, and people often come across them in their gardens just digging, or they break the surface, or squirrels will dig them up. And we often get contacted by people saying, I think we have truffles in our garden. And so what it looks like when you're collecting them that way is, see if this works.
Yeah, you can start pulling out.
Maybe we have more someday here. You wouldn't know. There.
Truffles.
There, another one. The small one. There, wait. There, one more here.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But in the internet, and look, none of them one like it, you know. Just one, and then they never see again.
Yes, it's the size of it.
So that's how you do it without a dog. It's amazing how many people can do this, and then you know the place. When you see them bringing their dogs out, they bring the dog to where the truffles are. They don't typically go running through the woods with the dog and stop and say there's truffles here. You kind of work out where that they are, and historically people who harvest truffles know the trees that the truffles are growing around. So on poisoning, how poisonous are mushrooms? Some of them will kill you if you eat them, and what they do is they circulate in your system, in your blood, and you can't break them down, and they break down your liver and your kidneys. And there have been several liver transplants in Ireland because of eating poisonous mushrooms. It's only become a thing in Ireland in the last few years as people have got interested in foraging, because prior to that we were so scared to eat them that it was rare that it would happen. But we're still, even in hospitals now, they don't differentiate between the mushroom you ate. So they kind of treat you for being poisoned, whereas in places that are more used to it, they will, the specific chemicals that are working on you, they have different ways of treating them, but not in Ireland. In Ireland, we aren't at that stage yet. God forbid you'd ever need to get help with it, but Beaumont Hospital is where is the kind of poison centre in Ireland, I think. For some sayings, there's old mushroom hunters and bold mushroom hunters, but there's no old bold mushroom hunters. You can eat any mushroom once. I was on Dahi, the afternoon show with Dahi, what's his name, talking to him about mushrooms, and he says to me, he said, "Tell me now, Billy," he says, "but the mushrooms, you know the mushrooms that grow in the garden," he said, "can you eat them?" I said, "Oh yeah, you can, yeah." He said, "What? I thought you couldn't eat them." I said, No, I said, "You can eat any mushroom once." You know? Just we say to foragers, those of you who spend your time in the woods, to look out for ticks. There's a big problem with Lyme disease, and certainly I don't know if it's as bad around. In fact, I think Kerry is one of the hotspots for it. Is it? Is it? Yeah. So you got to look out for that, and if you get bitten by a tick, get it seen to. I think they give you an antibiotic immediately, and because the long-term effects can be awful. These are some of the poisonous mushrooms. This is a death cap. You can see the white gills, and this. Remember I mentioned the vulva at the base. You see it's like it's growing out of an egg. So you're looking at the base. And when we're doing mushroom hunts, we'll have people bringing these back, and we'll say just, try to take the base as well, and so we can be sure that that's the kind of mushroom it is. This is a very poisonous one. If you eat it, you will cramps, diarrhea, sweating, aches and pains for after about 2 or 3 hours, and then that fades off, and you go into a kind of a false remission, and then about 24 hours later it comes back again. At that stage you're in big trouble. So it's worth avoiding. See them growing out. These are lesser poisonous ones. It's another very poisonous one. All white gills. You see how beautiful that mushroom is? There's a theory I heard that they said that it's, they call it the angel of death, that it actually attracts people to want to eat it. This is a brown roll rim. These are very toxic. They're cumulative hemotoxin. You can eat them once or twice or 3 times or 4 times over a few years, get away with it. 5th, 6th time, it triggers a response in your immune system, and it starts breaking down your blood, and it's similar to leukemia, and it kills you. You can see them, they're brown, and they're an in-rolling rim, and they're quite common. There was a professor in Germany who maintained that they were actually safe to eat, and it took him something like 7 years to prove himself wrong. You can see that on the internet. There's a kind of breakdown of it. And then the most famous mushroom of all is the fly agaric, which is psychoactive, but also makes you sick. It's also quite toxic. So, it's not a good combination to be sick and psychoactive. It's been used by, this is kind of the Christmas mushroom and the Christmas. It's reindeer love to eat them. In fact, reindeer coming up to Christmas, these grow, and the reindeer eat them, and it gives them great energy, and it's the fuel for making reindeers fly for Christmas time. So you'll see reindeer will be jumping around the field when they start to eat them. They're getting ready for that flight. This will be up in the Arctic with the Samis up where near Lapland and Santa is and that. And the Samis actually collect the reindeer urine. There's a couple of ways of eating this that won't make you sick. Ironically, one of them is if someone eats them and then urinates and you drink the urine, that cuts off the sickness part, and you get the psychoactive part. That's the origin of the term getting pissed, by the way. But they're also used in the Sami collect them, put them into reindeer bladders, and they ferment, and they when they're in their yurts in wintertime, they go into a kind of hibernation. It's dark outside 24/7, and the snow is up to here. They're in their yurts with the fires. They have very little to do, and they drink this stuff, and it's soporific, and it puts them into almost coma. And it's funny then, the only time at that time of year, the only way they can get in and out of the yurts is through the chimney. So they go and visit each other through the chimneys. And this is all the kind of, and not only that, but when the Samis are going through the woods and they find these mushrooms, they'll pick them and they'll stick them on the end of trees, so on the end of pine trees. So you got these red and white baubles, and they dry out on the end of the trees, and when they come back that way, then they can collect them dried. And that's the, but I've gone through everything very fast. So what I do now maybe is give you a few minutes to ask questions.
Right, Bill. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. That was absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions? There's been so much information there. Did you get up to the 115,000 varieties? Did you mention them all?
Jesus, no. No. But if you got a few hours, I can keep going.
Okay, I think some. Oh, here we go. We have a question.
Are all ink caps edible? Are all ink caps edible?
No. And in general, there's no easy kind of rules like that with mushrooms. Some ink caps some of them have a reaction with alcohol. So perhaps if you don't drink alcohol, and I mean 24 hours either side of eating the mushroom, There's some that you can, but some would be toxic if you did drink alcohol. But not all ink caps are edible, but a few of them are.
Okay, we have another question down here at the back.
Yeah, hi. You said that you wouldn't want to eat chicken of the woods if it was growing on a ewe because they could absorb the toxins. Do you have to worry about that? Let's say, you were saying that you can harvest, I forget which one, that's in the Sitka spruce forest. But if they're using pesticides and things like that, do you have to know what? Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, you do. Now, there's a debate amongst people who know better than me about the yew tree and whether it actually does absorb the and some are saying it doesn't. But the general rule up to now has been not to eat them. But yes, you do, because if they're spraying... Now, my understanding is that the mushroom itself will not have... So if you're spraying glyphosate around the place, that the mushroom itself will not be contaminated, unless of course it's sprayed with it, which it may have been. But if it's in the ground, that the mushroom itself isn't contaminated, despite the fact the mycelium might be affected by it. But in general, I wouldn't take the risk. And if I know a place is being sprayed, I wouldn't eat the mushrooms out of it. The other thing you want to watch out for is beside roads, where you get where you're burning petrol and diesel, because they absorb heavy metals from the fumes. So busy roads as well.
Okay. Now, as Bill mentioned, there are several items here, and we're going to move those over to the front of the tent over there, the circus tent, so people will have plenty of space and plenty of time to ask any questions about all of the stuff. I'm just amazed at the amount of information there, Bill. Again, people have noticed this code up here if you'd like to scan to make a donation towards the running costs of the festival. It'd be much appreciated. So we have a talk coming up here now, Watering Seeds of Change. So once again, please, would you say thank you for Bill. Wonderful talk.
Come over and talk to us. We'll be just there at the tent, and we'll have some of the truffle trees and the supplements there. So I think we have foraging knives, and we even have dyed fabrics that you can see that Frida has done with mushrooms, where you can actually produce a fabric dye.
Yeah. Will you be here for a while, Bill? Will you be over there for as long as it takes?
We'll be there as long as it takes. Nothing better. We'd hang around here all weekend happily.